All right. So linear equations or linear functions. I actually think I probably laid out the review a little bit better in this note package, but I'm just going to kind of go through just some basic things to remember about each of those forms of a line, and then look through some questions because there's a really particular type of questions that you have to be able to answer for the test. All right. So first thing is we know how to find slope, and then we come into this unit and we talk about, well, we can take slope and we can find parallel and perpendicular slope. So lines of slopes that are parallel are going to be like the same, right? Parallel slopes are like the exact same slope. Those lines will never intersect because they're parallel. And so that means if I have, m is equal to 4, a parallel slope is going to also equal 4. Perpendicular slopes are going to be slopes that are what? Pardon? Negative reciprocals, yeah. Negative reciprocals. And if you don't know what a negative reciprocal is, well, that's taking the number you have, timesing it by -1, and flipping it. And so, for example, if I have the same slope, m is equal to 4, and I'm looking for the perpendicular slope, I need to take this, times it by -1, and flip it. So when I times that by 4 by -1, it's going to become a negative number. It's going to become a negative number. But when I flip 4, what's it going to become? When I flip 4, what's it become? 1 over 4, right? Because right now I could write this as a fraction as 1. 4. I could write that as 4 over 1. And when I flip that, it's going to become 1/4. Negative 1/4 would be the negative reciprocal slope. All right, so here is an example. It says, sketch and determine the slope of a line perpendicular to the given line. So I should be able to look at a graph and just say, well, the slope of this line is equal to what? Well, the rise is 1 and the run is 2. So 1 over 2. Now they want me to create another line that has perpendicular. Perpendicular. So if I'm going to create a perpendicular line to this, what is the slope going to be? -2 over 1, right? So I'll take the negative reciprocal, times that by -1, and flip it. So -1/2 times 1, -1 is going to become negative, and 2. And so if I'm going to graph this, that means to find the next few points, I'm going to go 2 up and 1 to the left. So if I start at the same point and I go 2 up and 1 to the left, 2 up and 1 to the left, so I have points here and here. Go down here if I wanted. That line, if I got my protractor out, should intersect at 90 degrees, right? That's what perpendicular means, is that two lines are intersecting at 90 degrees. And so the next part here is something that we need to know for our problem-solving questions. So they say determine the slope parallel and perpendicular to 3y plus 6 is equal to 12. And then a lot of people are going to make a mistake where they look at this and they say, okay, the slope is 6, and then I just find parallel and perpendicular slope from here. We can't find slope unless we have a graph and we can just figure out the slope, unless they say the slope is 4, or unless we're in slope-intercept form. So that means I need to rearrange this to do what? What do I have to do with this to find slope? What do I have to do there to find the slope of that line? Isolate y, right? I need to get into slope-intercept form. So I would subtract 6x from either side. What I do to one side, I'll do to the other. So 3y is equal to 12 minus 6x. And then I have to divide every term by 3 to get y by itself. So I'll just come over here. Y is equal to 12 divided by 3 is 4, minus 6 divided by 3 is 2x. So now I know I can look at this and say, well, what's the slope of my line that they just gave me? What's the slope here? -2, right? And make sure you're not making the mistake of, oh, whatever's first is always slope. right? It's whatever's attached to x. So m is -2. So the parallel slope is going to be -2, right? Exactly the same. And the perpendicular slope, to figure out where that line would intersect at 90 degrees, I take that, times it by -1, so it's going to become positive, and flip it would be 1/2. Okay. All right. Slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form, so y equals mx plus b. You're actually not given what the forms are on, like you're given the equation y equals mx plus b, but it doesn't say slope-intercept form on your formula sheet. But I should be able to look at this and say, oh, it gives me slope, gives me the y-intercept. So you should know by looking at this, m is going to be your slope, and b is the y-intercept value. It could be out of order, like we just had up there, but whatever's attached to x is the slope, and the other value is going to be your y-intercept. In order to be in this form, we have y is going to be by itself. Right? And so this is a nice form because I can look at it, I can tell the slope, I can tell the y-intercept, and this is also the form that we can put on my calculator. Okay, so let's go look at a few questions with slope-intercept form, and then we'll go look at the other forms. So slope-intercept form, if I give you a function and I say graph this, you have to get y by itself so you can take those pieces of information and be able to graph a line from there. Or if you're given a line like here, you should be able to look at that. Look at that graph and be able to tell me what the equation of that line is equal to. It's pretty simple. I should just be able to jump into y equals mx plus b, assuming that I'm given a nice perfect y-intercept. If I'm not, then I might have to start in slope point form. So I'll go find those pieces of information. So the m of this is going to be the rise of 1, 2, 3, 4 over the run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that right? Over 6. Is that the right slope? Why not? Negative. So that's actually going to be equal to -2/3. We always want our slope in lowest form. So -2/3 x plus the y-intercept. What's the value of the y-intercept? Pardon? The value of the y-intercept right here, yeah, is 5. Okay, so plus 5. Don't assume that, like, if this line goes through, like, right here, you can't just be like, oh, we'll make the y-intercept 1. Doesn't work like that. Generally, they'll give you other points, and then you'll have to find slope, rearrange to get your y-intercept. With that being said, sorry, I just remembered something I wanted to say. So a line that has a slope like that is what slope? Positive. Line that falls from left to right is negative slope. A line that goes, let's say, sorry, my next one's usually horizontal, 0, right? The rise would be 0 over a run of a number is going to give me 0 slope. And a vertical line, undefined, right? Undefined or infinite, yeah. All right. The next type of question, so determine the slope and y-intercept of this equation, 5x plus 2y equals 10. Could everybody do that, or should I go through it? I'm hoping that everybody could do that, but do we need to take a second to try it on our own, or what do you guys think? No what? Okay, all right, take a second to do that then. All right, so if I take a look at this 5x plus 2y equals 10, and they're asking me to find the slope and the y-intercept. Right now, this is in standard form. That's irrelevant, but that doesn't tell us anything about the graph, right? We need to be in y equals or slope-intercept form to do that. So I have to get y by itself, so I'll subtract 5x into preserve equality. I have to do that to both sides. So 2y equals 10 minus 5x. To get y by itself, I'd have to divide, right? Because 2 is being multiplied by y. So I'll divide by 2. And again, to preserve equality, we have to do that to everything on the other side. So y is equal to 10 divided by 2 is 5. And minus 5 over 2, I'm just going to leave that as the slope. Leave that if you can. So y equals 5 minus 5 over 2x. So I should be able to say the slope is what? Negative 5 over 2. That's my slope. And the y-intercept of that line would be 5. Okay. And so you should be able to, like, if I give you this, you should be able to graph that. But to graph that, you could either find the x and y-intercepts, find 2 points, or find the slope and the y-intercept. Okay. Just as a question, let's say I give you this. I think that I've seen maybe some stuff like that. So, anyways, x plus 6 over 2. What's the slope there? Right. Yeah. Right. So technically, there's an invisible 1 here, so that's the slope. 1 over 6 times x. They're just putting the x to the numerator. Just so you know, in case you see that. All right. Next one, slope point form. Slope point form. Obviously, this tells us the slope, and you can start here by having some coordinate. Right, that's going to be some coordinate. Slope point form is always the form I start in, or like 90% of the time, unless I'm given slope and y-intercept. I'm always going to start in slope point form because I can start with a slope and a point and then convert to my other points. So this is going to be usually my starting place for the problem solving questions, then convert to other forms. Right, I can't just take information and like jump into general form. I can't just take 2 points and jump into slope intercept form. Okay, I always want to start here, and if I'm starting here, that means I have to have the slope and I have to have a coordinate. And if you look on the review sheet for this, I gave you quite a bit of information as to the different ways that the problem solving questions might give you slope, as well as the different ways that they might give you a point. And so the different ways they might give you a slope, I'll just talk through them quickly, is they might give you 2 points. They might say, you know, this line passes through 7,5 and 12,6. You should be able to find the slope from there. They might give you a graph. They might give you an equation that's parallel or perpendicular to, and in that case, you have to rearrange to get y by itself and solve for the slope. They might give you the coordinate or the point by either saying it passes through that point, or they might say the same x-intercept as whatever graph, or the same y-intercept as whatever graph. To go from slope point form, we can kind of go intermediate to slope intercept. So slope intercept, that's y equals mx plus b. And we said you have to do a really particular thing here. You have to do things in order to make sure that we're, again, like preserving that equality. Sometimes you can rearrange, but if you do it wrong, it's not going to work. So to go from slope point form to slope intercept form, what do I have to do? Anybody remember? Pardon? You have to multiply, then move, right? Multiply the slope in, and then move whatever this value is over. And you have to do it in that order. Otherwise, if you start adding things in before you've multiplied, you're going to do things wrong. I'm not going to preserve that equality. Okay, now from slope-intercept form, I could then move to general form. I have to make sure I multiply, then move to get into general form. And so general form is the last form of the line. You'll be given that on the test, but you still have to remember like some of the stipulations for general form. General form is kind of unfortunate. It doesn't tell us anything about the graph. So it doesn't tell us anything about a graph, which means you can't just jump into general form. It doesn't tell us anything about a line or a graph. And so you can't just, this isn't a starting place. You can't start with general form. You need to convert to general form. You can't start with general form. You must convert. Another thing that you need to remember is the conventions for general form. General form has some very particular conventions that we have to adhere to, which is what? Does anybody remember? Yep. Right, x, yeah, both of you guys got it. So x must be positive. So that means the coefficient here on A needs to be a positive number. It can't be negative. What else? Right. So we also have to say no fractions or decimals. And I mean, if I look at this general form, it already gives me an indication that everything should be on one side, or everything's going to equal 0. Everything on one side. Okay. So I'm going to take a few minutes and go through a few of the different type of questions that they give us where we have to solve for the equation of a line. A few people are practically writing, but all of this is on there. Sometimes it just helps to like write. So yeah. Okay, I'll come back if anybody needs that. All right. So wait, I lost my example I wanted to go through. Where are you? Oh, maybe not. All right, whatever. I thought I had a question there that said like convert this from whatever form to general form, but we'll probably end up doing that within here, so that's fine. So the first equation or the first question says determine the equation of a line in general form that has a slope of 1/2 and goes through the point -2, 6. And so a lot of people will make this mistake. They'll be like, hey, general form, boom, boom, throw some numbers in and I'm good. Doesn't work that way, right? We can't jump into general form. So they gave me slope. They gave me a point. That means I'm going to start with slope point form. So I have a slope. I have a point. That means I can take this information and substitute it into my equation. So this is x1, y1. So take that information and put it into my equation, right? There's not a whole lot of work here other than substituting and then converting it to general form. So y minus y1, which is 6, y minus 6 equals the slope, which is -1/2, x minus a -2, so x plus 2. So there's my equation in slope point form. Most of the time, it's never just stay in slope point form. It's always like now convert it to standard or convert it to general or convert it to slope-intercept form. So they're asking me to go all the way to general here, which means I need to multiply. So I'll multiply that -1/2 in. So -1/2 x, and -1/2 times 2 is going to give me a -1. And I haven't touched the left side there, so I'll just keep it as y minus 6. So I multiplied. Now I'm going to move. So I need to move all of the terms in this case just to one side because I'm trying to get to general form. Now it doesn't matter if you want to take the y and 6 and move it to the left or take the x and the 1 and move it to the other side. It doesn't really matter. Let's just say we're going to subtract y and add 6. So if I do that, I'll end up with a 0 on the left side equals -1/2 x minus y, and -1 plus 6 is going to give me a +5. But I'm not going to find any of those answers on my multiple choice sheet. And if that's where you stop, you're only going to get 1.5 out of 2 for that question. What do I need to keep doing? Make x further than that, and I got to get rid of the fraction. So if I need to make x positive and I need to get rid of that fraction, what am I going to have to do here? Times by -2, right? And remember, if you're multiplying by -2, you can't just do that to one term. We have to preserve the equality. So I'll multiply that to everything in there. And so this is going to become 0 times -2 is 0. -1/2 times 2 is just going to give me a 1x. Negative y times -2 gives me a positive 2y. And -2 times 5 gives me a -10. There's my equation. Yeah. Yeah, just by 2. So multiply that entire equation by whatever the denominator or denominators are to get rid of them. Yeah. Okay. I have a few. How many questions do I have? Just the 2 more. Okay. I'll just go through them. All right. Next one says determine the equation of a line in slope-intercept form that goes through the points -6, 11, and 3, -1. So slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. But in order for me to start with y equals mx plus b, I need the slope and I need the y-intercept. Did they give me that? Did they give me slope or y-intercept? Directly, did they give me any of that here? No. So what I'm going to have to do, first of all, is find the slope. So how am I going to find the slope here? Right, y2, -1, minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And again, make sure when you're substituting in, you're bringing those negative integers in with you. So m is equal to -1 minus 11 is -12 over 3 plus 6 is 9. So m is equal to, divide those both by 3, -4 thirds. So now they gave me enough information I can figure out slope. Can I figure out my y-intercept here? Like, just do they give it to me? No. So what I need to do is go and start with y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. Once you have the slope and you have some points, go to slope point form and then convert to slope intercept form. So y minus y1, it doesn't really matter what point I use. Usually I use the easier one, so I'm going to choose this one. So y minus y1, so minus a -1 is +1. M is equal to -4 thirds. X minus x1, which is 3. And then I would multiply that out. Y plus 1 equals -4 thirds x. And then -4 thirds times -3 is going to give me a positive 4. And then I need to finish this question to get into slope-intercept form. So y by itself. So I've multiplied. Now I'm just going to move that -1 or that 1 over by subtracting it. -4 thirds x plus 3. And I'm done. I should technically be able to graph that on my calculator and see that it goes through those 2 points. And then I could know that I did that correctly. All right. One last question for this section. All right, determine the equation of a line in general form that goes through the point 15, -8 and is parallel to 3x minus 5y equals 60. So general form, I can't just start there. They do give me a point, which is equal to 15, -8. It's a problem solving question, so I always say, okay, I'm going to start here. But I also need then to jump into slope point form, I need the slope. Do they give me the slope here? Do I have enough information that I could solve for the slope? Yeah. So they say this parallel to 3x minus 5y equals 60. So what a lot of people will do incorrectly is they'll say the slope is equal to 3. Why is that wrong? Right, we need to be in y equals to tell the slope. So I'd have to minus 3x minus 3x. So -5y is equal to 60 minus 3x, and divide that by -5. Divided by 5. Why can't I figure that out? Thank you. Plus 3 over 5. X. Yeah, thank you. Slope. Y-intercept doesn't matter. All I was really caring for is the slope, because I'm saying they're telling me the line that I'm going to create is parallel to this line right here. Well, the only piece of information I need then is the slope. The slope is going to be exactly the same in that line as it is in my line. So now I have enough information to take that, substitute into slope point form, or sorry, yeah, slope point form. So y minus y1, positive 8, equals m, 3 over 5, x minus x1, which is 15. And I got to go to general form, so I got to multiply. And I don't really want to talk myself through this quickly. Negative 30 over 5 is going to give me negative 6. Is that right? 6, no. 45 over 5 is 9. And so I got to go to general form, so everything has to go to one side. 0 equals 3 over 5x minus 17 minus y. And I need to get in general form, so the last thing I'd have to do here is what? Times it by the denominator. Got to get rid of that. Yeah, so I'll times that by 5. So 1, 2, 3. So 0 equals 3x minus whatever 17 is times 3. Thank you. 5y.